I'm John Lee, and in this brief video I'll outline the 7 most common ways that I see actuarial students throw away marks in the Paper B exam for subjects CS1 and CS2. So in no particular order, they are students submitting answers but with no code. This is an absolute no-no, and in the exam this will result in 0 marks. Fortunately, I've not seen too many students do this, but I don't want to risk it. Okay, you must absolutely include your code. Number 2, students including their code, but not their output. Even if your code is correct, you will not receive full marks without the output included in your Word document. Number 3, students including their code and output, but not adding any comments. So far, 30% of every CS1 Paper B exam has been for comments or interpretation of the output. For CS2, it has varied between 15 and 25%. In some places, it's obvious that you need to add some comments. For example, if you carry out a test, R will give the output with the p-value, but then you have to interpret whether or not you should reject the null hypothesis. However, the instructions for the CS1 and CS2 Paper B exams do actually state, when a question requires a particular numerical answer or conclusion, candidates must explicitly and clearly state this in the Word document, separately from and in addition to the R output that contains the relevant numerical information. So even when the output gives a clear answer, for example the mean of a distribution, you should also state this explicitly as a comment. The mean of this distribution is whatever. Number 4, students not labelling graphs clearly. The instructions for the CS1 and CS2 Paper B exams explicitly state that students should include titles, axes labels, and where relevant, legends in all graphical output that is generated in R. Now, R often does many of these, but do check that they are sensible. For example, histogram of X is not at all helpful and would need to be renamed in order to get all the marks. Note there's always at least 1 mark per graph in the exam for the labels, and so missing labels is throwing away easy marks. Number 5, students coding from scratch. If there's a built-in function in the allowable packages, for example like t-test, then use it. Coding it from scratch might show that you understand the concepts, but it also shows that you're lacking good sense, because coding it from scratch is going to require more time, and the CS1 and CS2 Paper B exams are already quite time pressured. There's no point proving you're clever if you still fail the exam. Number 6, misreading the question. Too many students answer what they think the question says rather than what it actually says. An example of this was in the recent CS1 Paper B, which required students to plot residuals against the X values. However, many students saw that it was a residual plot and without reading the question properly did standard built-in plot of residuals versus fitted values and therefore lost marks. Read the question out loud if you can and highlight any key phrases to avoid making the same mistake. And finally, number 7, many students who did put comments lacked detail in their comments. For example, students said there was positive correlation between 2 variables, rather than being specific and saying strong, positive, linear correlation. Or students might say, we reject H0 in a test, rather than the p-value of 3.4% is less than 5%, so we reject the null hypothesis at the 5% level, therefore it is reasonable to assume the mean is not 0. And this concludes the 7 most common ways that I see actuarial students throw away marks. Now they say the fool learns from his own mistakes, whereas the wise man learns from the mistakes of others. So I'm hoping that you're going to be wise actuarial students and learn from these errors and not throw away marks in your exams.